Great, excellent. So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me to speak this morning. Really looking forward to it. Hopefully have a few little nuggets for everyone listening in. So my name's Keith McGregor. I'm with Expense Reduction Analysts, or ERA, as we seem to be more commonly known these days. For those that don't know us, we're a cost management consultancy. Our global headquarters are down the road to me in Kings Hill, and I'm based in Dartford. So while we're a global business, we are very much a Kent-based business as well. And I have an awful lot of clients in and around Kent. This morning's talk, I'll try and keep it under the 30 minutes for sure. I'm aiming for 25. Let's see how I get on. If I've got time for questions at the end, I'll answer them at the end. If not, I will answer them subsequently. I'll make sure I come back to each and every one of you individually following the call, possibly tomorrow, maybe early next week, if we've got any unanswered questions. Please put your questions in the chat box and I'll do my best to answer them, like I say, either at the end or tomorrow. The talk is obviously about the impact of COVID-19 on fleet costs. I'll also be talking about some of the other impacts on fleet costs, both past and future, if you like. One being WLTP, the new emission testing procedures, another being Brexit, and I'll also be saying a few words about fuel costs. Okay, so there's three people on the screen. There's only one of me, obviously. The other two are people who've helped me very much with this morning's talk and are very much experts in ERA in their particular field. I'm very much, my job is basically to meet business owners, CEOs, managing directors, finance directors, those kind of people, and see if we can help unlock added value in and around their supply chain partners. While we're talking this morning, obviously, about fleet and a bit about fuel, they're just a couple of the sort of 40+ areas where we've got expertise in ERA, where we help businesses unlock that value. And the way we work is effectively, I open the doors, hopefully, and find out where people might want help. And then if they want help around fleet or around fuel or tyres, I'll bring in the likes of Sean and Duncan. Sean and Duncan have given me a lot of material for today's talk, so I'd like to thank them both very much for that, along with the wider fleet team and the wider fuel and tyres team. A little bit of background on Sean first. Sean's been in fleet since the early 80s. He spent over 35 years in fleet. Fortunately, Sean can't listen in because he's on holiday, so I've given away his age somewhat, but apologies, Sean. But yeah, Sean's been in the industry an awful long time. He pretty much knows everything there is to know about fleet, and he seems to know, and everyone seems to know him. You know, everyone in the fleet sector knows Sean, and Sean knows everyone in the fleet sector. It's very common for me to be in a meeting with a client and they're talking about their leasing company or somebody else they deal with, and they mention a name, and Sean's like, oh yeah, I know them. So Sean has an awful lot of contacts in the industry, an awful lot of knowledge and an awful lot of experience. And what Sean does is he uses those things, his contacts, his experience and his knowledge. He combines that with ERA's processes, and our leverage in the marketplace, and deliver some fantastic results for our clients. And we've got clients as, you know, as small as sort of fleets of 20 vehicles, as big as tens of thousands, or sort of 10,000. And he manages around 25-30,000 vehicles for ERA clients across the UK and Europe. Now, Duncan's part of our fuel and tyres team. He learned most of what he knows about fuel and tyres through his father, Ken. And Ken is also part of our fuel and tyres team. In fact, they're both presenting a logistics conference today that's been going on for a few days. Now, Duncan's father, Ken, has owned transport businesses and logistics businesses through his career. He's been chair of the Road Haulage Association, so he knows an awful lot about fuel, tyres and logistics. And he's passing that information on to Duncan, his son, for a bit of succession planning. I think Ken's hoping to retire in the next few years, even though he's been saying that for the past few years, but we shall see. Quick look at the next slide. I'm not going to stick on this for very long. It just gives you an example of some of our clients across the world and some of the projects, some of the project areas where we've got expertise, where we've delivered some great savings for our clients. But on to fleet. That's what everyone's here for on the talk this morning. So let's have a quick talk generally about fleet. First thing I wanted to just focus on quickly was on contract hire prices. So if you've got a car or a van or a truck and you've got it on a contract hire, you pay a monthly amount of money every month for the duration of the lease. What you may not know is that price is made up of almost 20 different variables. It's actually 18 variables that make up that monthly price. And those variables are influenced by the likes of manufacturers, so Ford, BMW, VW, etc., leasing companies, so the likes of Alphabet, Volkswagen Financial Services, etc. And there's also an awful lot of negotiation in some of those variables, and that's sometimes where you can make a big difference to what you pay. Sometimes with our help, sometimes on your own. And out of those 18 elements, there's a few that make up the bulk of what you pay every month. Probably the biggest one is the list price of the vehicle that you're buying. And that is set by the manufacturer. There's absolutely nothing you can do about it. The only thing you can do if you want to influence that is look for a different make or model of vehicle. You can't influence the list price at all. But the second biggest one potentially is your discount. And that can be negotiated both through the lease company and through the manufacturers direct. We can negotiate some very good discounts for our clients, and sometimes our clients can negotiate very good discounts themselves, but that can make up a big part of your monthly cost. The third biggest factor is residual value. That's the value that the leasing company estimates that your vehicle will be worth at the end of the 3 or 4 or 5 year or whatever term you've got the vehicle on. That is heavily lease company dependent. You could go to 3 different leasing companies, and if they were to give you their estimates of residual value, which is information we're party to, you can see huge differences between different lease companies. So picking the right lease company can have a big impact on how much you pay. And the other big one that affects all sort of vehicles across the contract hire market is interest rates. And again, these can be negotiated. The leasing companies have a fixed cost that can't be avoided, but they often have a margin which can be chunky, which again can be negotiated and help reduce your monthly cost. That's sort of talking about it generally. We're talking about construction. Another huge cost particularly in the construction sector around contract hire is end of contract repairs. If anyone's returned a van or a truck at the end of a contract hire period, unless that van is in absolutely pristine condition, which absolutely never happens, you're likely to be clobbered with enormous, potentially, repair bills. They could be huge. Now, leasing companies can find ways to work around this, but it's not necessarily in their interest to do so. We can often help you find other ways of doing things that may well reduce your costs. The way we work is we work on a sort of holistic basis. We look at what do you actually need from your fleet, what's the best way of delivering that. Let's look at how we can hopefully get you that for better value. You may not get the same answer from a leasing company because it may reduce their profits. And let's be honest, turkeys don't vote for Christmas, do they? So moving on, WLTP. I think this has got a fabulous name. It's called the Worldwide Harmonized Light Vehicle Testing Procedure, somehow abbreviated to WLTP. Very interesting name, if you ask me. This is the new testing procedures on emissions and mileage, actually, that was introduced following the Volkswagen Dieselgate scandal. a few years ago where they were found out to be effectively cheating the system. They had a little device in their cars that worked out when they were in a test centre being tested and suddenly produced a lot better miles per gallon and a lot lower emissions. When that was discovered, see, there was a big scandal that broke out, and part of the changes were that a new testing procedure, the WLTP, was introduced. What that's done, one of the things that's done is it's effectively pushed up CO2 emissions for every vehicle out there, or every internal combustion engine vehicle that's out there, certainly. And what that's meant is costs have gone up, both for the businesses that lease or own those vehicles and the people that drive those vehicles, the company car drivers. So benefit in kind tax has gone up substantially as the CO2 emissions have gone up. Now, 12 months ago, our advice was basically, if you said to me 12 months ago, we're looking to buy a couple of hundred vehicles in March, April 2020, what would you suggest we do? Our advice would be very strongly, make sure you get them registered before the end of March, because that was when effectively the new testing procedures were not adopted, but came into force, if you like. So, for example, if you bought a BMW 116 diesel and you had it registered on the 31st of March this year, the emissions would have been 94 grams per kilometre, 94 grams of CO2 per kilometre. If you'd registered one a month later, that would have gone up to 111 grams. So a significant increase in cost for everybody. One of the things that's led to an increasing push for, because there was always a push towards it anyway, is demand for electric vehicles, or EVs. Now, WLTP has pushed up the cost of petrol and diesel cars, so a lot of people have been trying to move into the EV market. There's a few things affecting EV sales. One is availability. It's very difficult to get hold of a new electric vehicle. There's not much of a second-hand market at the moment. There's very long lead times on them. Basically, the manufacturers just aren't able to produce them in enough volume at the moment to meet demand. So that's one issue. The second issue is they're very expensive. You know, being double the price of the equivalent petrol or diesel is not uncommon. So they are very expensive. And the third thing is infrastructure, the charging infrastructure. If you're lucky enough to live in a house with a drive and you can park your car outside your house, you can put a charging point outside your house, then great, you're okay. If you're like a significant proportion of the population who live either in a city centre flat or just somewhere where you can't park your car directly outside and plug your car into a sort of personal charging point, you're stuffed basically. There's just not the infrastructure out there to get all the vehicles charged. So as a result of those three issues, why we'd like to think that EV sales are really taking off, the fact is they're not. Last year, 2.3 million cars were sold in the UK. Only 38,000 of them were electric, so that's just under 2%. Now, the government's been talking for a long while about banning petrol and diesel cars. 2040 was mooted, 2035 was talked about. The latest talk is 2030. That's 10 years away. Are we really going to move from 2% of sales being electric to 100% in 10 years? I'm not sure. I can't see it, to be honest with you. And when it comes to commercial electric vehicles, I'm afraid the technology just isn't quite there yet. It just isn't there. We've had lots of our clients ask us, you know, we want to be greener, we want to save money, we want to do what we can. What electric vehicles are out there that will meet our needs? And with the commercial sector, like I say, it just isn't there. Give you an example, the Renault Master, the electric version of that Firstly, it costs over £60,000, more than double the equivalent diesel. And secondly, and probably more importantly for everyone who might think about buying one, is that in the winter, you're only going to get 50 miles out of a charge, which is pretty unusable for virtually everybody. I believe it takes about 6 hours to charge as well. So it's really just not usable. It'll obviously change, but at the moment, we're just not there yet. Okay, so COVID-19, what's COVID-19 done for fleet? Well, I suppose we could argue, and there is a body of evidence out there to say that people are more reluctant to travel on public transport at the moment. You know, there's potential health risks associated with that, and people are far happier to jump in the car than to get onto public transport. So we may see a slight uptick in demand for cars in the future, but we shall see. But the short-term effect has been hugely negative. We saw a 40% fall in sales in 2020. Effectively, that's all around lockdown. And what the thing that I've noticed more than anything else is if I'm out on the road, I don't see very many 20 plate vehicles out there at all. The 20 plate ran from the 1st of March to the end of August, and there's just very few out there at all. Now, during the lockdown, we've done our best to try and help our clients to reduce their costs. You know, they've often suffered revenue-wise significantly, and they want help with costs. One of the things we looked at initially, which proved very, very difficult, was to basically get the vehicles off the road. If we can prove to HMRC that the employee doesn't have access to a company car, then they're not subject to the onerous benefit in kind taxes. But persuading or getting an employee to return a vehicle to a place of work or to a dealership or whatever it might be, when only essential travel is allowed, is nigh on impossible. The government then had a little change of tack and said, actually, look, if these people return the keys, that will be enough. That will prove they haven't got access to those vehicles, and that will be enough for us to take away the benefit in kind. But returning keys is not the easiest thing in the world either. Keys get lost in the post. You may want to send them recorded, which means you've got to make an unessential visit to the post office. The keys cost a few £100s. If they do get lost, you know, it's a big problem. And probably more than all of those things is that the cars do need to be moved occasionally. You know, they might be blocking someone in, they might be causing an obstruction. You know, the person might use them once a month to go to the shops and do their shopping. So those things didn't really work. So these poor people were sitting at home on furlough, but still being clobbered for the full benefit in kind. But there are some things that have worked, and some things that you can still do to get your costs down or to get some cash back. The first one that works really well is extending your lease contracts. So if you've got vehicles on a 3-year term, you can extend to 4 years and reduce your monthly costs. That's quite an easy thing to do. Virtually all lease companies are very happy to do that. Another one very similar to that is altering your contract mileages. So if you've got vehicles on, let's say 3 years, 30,000 miles, that have been sitting there for 4 or 5 or 6 months not moving, you can reduce the contract mileage in line with what you expect it to be. And again, that will reduce your costs. Another thing we've seen, and we've helped a lot of clients with, is payment holidays. A lot of lease companies are amenable to that. Some aren't, but a lot are, so that can work. And another thing, if you own your vehicles, we've seen some businesses do is opt for a sale and lease back, where they've sold their vehicle to the leasing company and then leased it back for them, thus freeing up some cash. I think for the future, though, I think what we're going to see is COVID-19 is going to hit demand. Zoom meetings like this one are meaning less people are out traveling. You know, even when things get back to whatever normal might be, I'm not going to be driving to the places I used to drive all over the country for an hour or a 2-hour meeting. I'm going to be doing this stuff online, and I think pretty much everyone will be doing a lot more meetings online. So mileages will be reduced, need for cars will be reduced, and almost certainly, sadly, we're going to see a lot more redundancies when the furlough schemes and job protection schemes come to an end, particularly in sectors like hospitality and the like. And that's going to mean a lot less people wanting and needing cars. So there's going to be falls in demand, and that's going to affect the fleet sector, obviously. One of the things we have seen is that second-hand prices are still low. So buying second-hand can be a very good option for many businesses and individuals at the moment. I think the next slide will show how we're expecting second-hand values to maybe go up next year. Talking about everyone's favourite subject, Brexit. More good news. I think the fact is, we're potentially looking at a no-deal Brexit. Some might say it's a probability. Some say it's a possibility. But whatever happens, we're going to see an issue for fleet, because predominantly the view is, whatever your views are on Brexit, the fleet sector, the UK automotive sector, is not ready for it at all. And there are potentially some huge problems. Even reading an article yesterday in the Times that even if we get a deal, this won't necessarily mean tariffs are eliminated, because the complicated nature of where cars are built and where all their components come from. But basically, if we move to WTO tariffs on the 1st of January next year, that's going to mean everything goes up 10%. Tariff on exports and imports of 10%, which means, a 30,000 pound car is suddenly going to cost £33,000. And what we think that will mean for the UK sort of corporate sector who are looking to buy new vehicles is they simply won't. They'll extend their leases predominantly, is what will happen. And that will affect the UK automotive sector substantially. Over 800,000 people employed in that sector. We're potentially going to see some substantial job losses in automotive. And when I spoke to Sean last week to get some information about today, his sort of bugbear or concern was, well, why on earth aren't the UK automotive sector really shouting loudly at the UK government, saying, if you don't get your act together, this is going to cause us huge problems. This is potentially going to cause massive unemployment and all sorts of other economic problems. So there's a lot of concern in the industry about a no-deal Brexit. Now, what can you do to plan for this, to mitigate against it? Unfortunately, not very much, but we do have one or two options for you. If you're thinking about buying new vehicles now to get them before the 1st of January, you'll struggle. It's going to be very tough with the lead times as they are to get a vehicle registered and delivered prior to the 1st of January. It's probably going to be impossible. So the most obvious option, the one I sort of touched on already, is extending your leases. So if you've got vehicles that are due to end their leases early next year, I would be on the phone to your lease companies now, saying we want to extend these. And it might make sense to extend your whole fleet for a year or something like that, because that's more likely to get acceptance by your lease companies, and that's more likely to give you a bit more breathing space, which is essentially, I think, what everyone's going to need. And another option, if you do need to get stuff now, would be to buy secondhand, if that's an option for you. We'd anticipate secondhand prices rising next year, simply because we see new prices rising due to Brexit. So there might be a small window of opportunity between now and the end of the year, if that's what you need to do to go out and buy secondhand vehicles and get them in before the end of the year. Okay, so we've talked a lot about fleet. A related cost is fuel. Before we go on to that graph, just want to talk about one other thing related to fuel, which is particular importance to the construction sector, and that's gas oil or red diesel, which you will use to power your plant. Some of you may use it for heating oil as well. Now, from the 1st of April 2022, which is actually exactly 18 months ago away today. 1st of October today, 1st of April 2022, 18 months away today. Red diesel will have exactly the same duty applied to it as the road diesel you put in your diesel car, your diesel lorries. So the duty at the moment is around 11 pence a litre. It's going to go up to almost 58 pence a litre. So there's a massive increase there. It's expected to cost the construction sector, construction industry, around £1.3 billion per annum just in additional fuel duty. So if you're not on top of those costs at the moment, please get on top of them as soon as you can, because that's going to hit you hard in 18 months. Now, looking at the graph, if you look at the line to the bottom of the red, the sort of lower line of the two that goes quite bumpy, but obviously you can see it was a lot higher at the start of the year than the sort of trough at the end of April, and it's picked up a little bit since then. That bottom line is wholesale prices of diesel. And the top line is diesel pump prices. There's a sort of an average that's done on those. And what you can see obviously is the red area, which is the margin made per litre by UK retailers, has shot up substantially in 2020. Now, we always see an increase in margin when fuel costs go down. I think everyone knows that whenever there's a budget and fuel duty goes up, or there's an oil crisis and wholesale prices shoot up, the prices at the pump go up immediately. It seems like within seconds the prices have gone up at the pump. But equally, where there's something else that happened causing prices to go down, it never seems to happen with fuel duty, but certainly happens with wholesale prices, and that's what's happened in 2020. It takes a long while to filter through at the pumps, and that's what we're seeing at the moment. Now, arguably, you could say, well, demand's fallen so much that the UK retailers need to make more per litre because they're selling so much less, and there's potentially a case there. But ultimately, there's good opportunities for anyone at the moment who is either paying pump price for their diesel or for their petrol, or for anyone who is paying a contract price on a fuel card that isn't directly linked to the wholesale price. Now, when we do fuel projects for clients, we almost always, possibly always actually, get a deal that is linked directly to the wholesale price. It's called the Platts index. So we have access, our fuel team have access to this Platts index. So we know exactly what wholesale prices are on any particular day. So every time one of our clients makes a purchase, we can see what the margin is, and we can check that's in line with the contract. So an example might be, we get in place a contract or fuel price agreement, because there's generally no commitment to buy fuel, that might be, say, 5p over Platts. And what that can mean is that you're always paying 5p over Platts. If the market goes down, obviously your price comes down. If the market goes up, your price goes up, but the margin stays the same. And generally, those pricing agreements will hold for a very long time. We typically work on a 2 or 3 year engagement, but we've got those agreements that have gone on for over a decade. Because it works well for the business. They don't have to check prices all the time, and it works well for the suppliers because they know exactly how much they're making per litre. And yeah, they're not making a fortune, but they are making some money. Just a quick thing on tyres as well, another big cost for construction companies. We've put in place some very innovative solutions for construction companies, both around their lorries and vans on the road and also around their plant on site, to not just get them slightly cheaper tyres, which, you know, doesn't really get anyone excited, but more particularly to get solutions that mean their vehicles are on the road more often, their plant on site is up and running more often, and downtime due to tyre related issues is absolutely minimised. Some of our clients there that we're working with on fuel and fleet projects, hopefully you recognise some of those names. And basically that's it from me. I think I'm pretty much up to time now, so may not have time for questions now, so I will come back to you. My details, obviously, as you can see, are on the screen. Please feel free to note those down, give me a call, drop me an email. More than happy to answer questions, take your calls and your emails and that kind of thing. I just want to say again, thank you for everybody for listening in today. Hope you found it interesting. Hope you've got some value out of what I said today. And yeah, thank you very much. And that's it from me. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much, Keith. That was fascinating, very interesting. Could you pop your email address into the chat room? And
Absolutely.
then that's easier for people who haven't managed to pick up the email from your presentation.
Yeah, I'll do that now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did ask anyone if they had any questions, but you obviously told everybody all they needed to know. So that's really good. Just a little update. Guy Holloway will be able to join us later today. He'll come onto our networking lounge at 12 o'clock. He's so apologetic, but we're going to use it to our advantage a bit later on.